Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Extreme East Texas Winter Storm Ready, a CBS 19 weather special. I'm CBS 19 Chief Meteorologist Brett Anthony.
And I'm meteorologist Chandler Jordan.
Coming up in the next half hour, we're going to look ahead at what the rest of the winter could hold. Plus, we'll also get you ready for the colder weather by taking a look at what you need to do to prep your home and your car.
Plus, we'll talk with an East Texas organization that played a huge role in helping the area out during the winter storm of 2021. And we've got a handbook for you and your family to get you through the rest of the winter.
We also talk with an energy expert about the pros and cons of living on the Texas grid. But what about the rest of this winter? Are we going to see another surge of Arctic air? We use our long-range cycling pattern theory to find out. And here's what it shows. The biggest question this winter, is it going to snow? Will it get cold again like back in 2021? The atmosphere is a chaotic river of wind, but we have a way to bring order to that chaos, and it's called the Long-Range Cycling Pattern Theory, or LRC. There are lunar cycles and solar cycles, and weather patterns have cycles. Every year it's a different length, and every year it's a different pattern. Meteorologist Gary Lezak made this discovery nearly 2 decades ago.
Every year there's a new cycle length, and every year there's a new pattern. And so every fall that sets up, and we are in right now the second cycle of the pattern. That's basically what it's all about, but it allows us to predict when storm systems will return, basically almost predict every single day's weather around the entire globe.
To make our winter forecast, we look at signature storms within the cycling weather pattern. You might remember October 28th. This storm came back in December, and when it did, it produced a tornado outbreak in north central Texas. We expect this storm to cycle through again in late January and early March with possible severe weather. You might also remember November 4th, we had a tornado outbreak in northeast Texas. It returned in mid-December and brought our coldest air we've seen in nearly 2 years.
The storm system that just bombarded areas of the country with the Arctic blast and the snow in the upper Midwest Great Lakes area, etc., that is directly related to a storm or a part of the pattern that cycled back through about 7 weeks earlier.
That was November 4th, and so the December 19th storm is part of that pattern that will return in early February and mid-March. And when the patterns return in the same season, there is a higher likelihood of similar outcomes. So early February could be very snowy and cold.
It only influences the pattern. And so what will that influence be? It might shift your severe weather situation closer to you and maybe even a little bit farther west is what I think is going to happen, which might put you even more into it. It could be a really significant severe weather season.
There are other weather patterns that influence the long-range cycling pattern theory. We have to think about La Nina. It's starting to weaken. It's almost going into a neutral phase. When that happens, it can have a big impact on the types of weather that we see here in East Texas.
We know that the conditions just came together, produced severe thunderstorms. You've had a couple tornadoes earlier in the fall, and we now know when that part of the pattern is going to cycle back through.
All right, it's time to talk about key long-range takeaways. First of all, let's focus on the second half of January. Part of that pattern we saw in the fall, it's returning. So stormy, colder weather pattern is possible for the end of the month. And a winter severe weather setup could rear its ugly head once again. We've had plenty of those so far in the fall and in the winter. And because of the December 19th part of the pattern repeating in the same season, it's likely that Arctic air returns somewhere between late January and early February. In fact, between the 23rd and February 2nd, and that could bring ice and snow. Some other dates to watch: the middle part of January for sure. How about the middle part of February, February 8th to 12th. That could be a severe weather setup, or possibly as the colder air comes in, we may have some snow to deal with. February 17th to 19th, it might be another winter severe weather setup. And then at the end of February, we've got another stormy pattern emerging in East Texas. All right, so here's our winter weather forecast. Wetter than average, and that could include some snow. Didn't have any snow last year. We had lots of snow in 2021 and 2020. Maybe we see a little snow before this winter is over. One more blast of much colder air is coming in, so stay alert. Severe weather is also possible. If you want to read more about the forecast, visit cbs19.tv.
As we all know, winters in East Texas can be very cold, and sometimes you might hear myself or Chief Meteorologist Brett Anthony talk about a frost being possible or a freeze being possible. So we're going to break down how exactly does a frost form and what's the difference between a frost and a freeze. So to start off, you need an air temperature that ranges in the low to mid 30s, but it has to be above freezing. So for this example, we'll use an air temperature of 36 degrees. Now, cold air sinks, and as it sinks towards the surface, we typically in the winter time have colder surface temperatures than we do air temperature. So the cold air continues to sink. We've got a ground temperature of 32 degrees, and as the cold air sinks, there's water molecules that are in the air that are actively sinking as well. And as they make contact with the ground that is at or below freezing, that's where we start to see the development of some ice crystals, and in turn, you get frost to develop. So really the favorable atmospheric conditions that you need for frost to develop is a clear sky, light winds, nothing too breezy. You also need some lingering moisture in the air, temperatures that are above freezing but ranging in the 30s, as well as some type of lingering moisture as well on the ground. Now, a freeze is entirely different, and that's much, much colder air. And across the country, we have various times of the year when our last freeze typically happens. Of course, the farther north you are, the later in the year that your last freeze occurs. And it could be as late as June or late May across parts of the northern plains. But as far as Texas is concerned, the latest in the year is out towards the Panhandle near Amarillo and Lubbock, where there could be an average last freeze as late as early April. For most of the state of Texas, including all of East Texas, our typical last freeze occurs in March, and then towards Houston as well as Galveston and along the Texas coastline, our average last freeze typically occurs within January or February. So now you know the difference, and of course you'll know how to prepare accordingly whether you get a frost or a freeze.
Extreme East Texas Winter Storm Ready, sponsored by Stonewater Roofing and Gas and Supply.